warm-up and start we have to the day here. I would maybe just start by saying the inverse of what Peter said, so I'm more used to playing the guitar than I am to talking, so we kind of got it's reversed this morning. But that was just such a great introduction to the day here, and to get us started sort of the storytelling, which is kind of a theme of mine here today. So when I was asked to come here and talk to all of you about world music, I was thinking to myself, I'm not sure, I'm not an expert on world music. I know a lot about music, and I necessarily know about world music. Who's an expert on world music? Well, it's like saying, who's an expert on the world, right? So somebody would have to cover all of the possible topics that we could think about in the world. Who's an expert on that? Nobody. But we can tell a personal story. And that's sort of how I started to think about today's event and how I could contribute to it. And luckily I'm kind of early in the day, so I would like to kind of just set up a mindset and tell you a little bit about what my journey has been in music and in the world and in culture, and what connections I have made throughout my years being in music, being in musical life and culture, and hopefully kind of set a frame of mind for how we can think about all the wonderful topics and all the various experiences that you're going to hear about from other special speakers today. And so I would like to essentially just kind of take you through what I have experienced as a musician, as a person in the world of music, and hopefully that will be helpful to you, and hopefully that's something that you can appreciate as you continue to grow and learn about Korean music and about culture and music and how we can connect that. So I'd like to take you back to how it all started for me. This picture here, if you go back, actually, let's stay right there for a moment. As I was preparing for this, I asked a friend of mine in Norway, I need just a picture of my hometown, what it looked like when I was 9 years old, which is some time ago. I'm not that old, but it is some time ago anyhow. And okay, she said, fine, I'm on it. And I said, it needs to be simple. Just go downtown, take a picture right outside of the Bay Area. This is where I would be sitting as a young boy at 19 years old, just looking out from the harbor, essentially, in my native Norway, 5,000-6,000 miles away from here. So that's where it started from. That's where I grew up, in Arendal, Norway. My parents didn't go to school for very long at all, considering today's standards. They ended school at 13 and 14 years old. That was common at the time. My mom stayed for an extra year until 14 because she was academically inclined, so that was the extra year she got to do that. Everybody else went out to work. That was not unusual at the time at all. But that just kind of tells me something at this time, looking back, that, you know, came from a place where education, training, and things like that was something you were doing at work, essentially. That was a vocational kind of mindset in every way. There was some music in my home, though. The organ was the instrument of the time. Just the organ was what people had in their house, and so did we as well. Nobody really knew what to do with this, because what you do with an organ if you go on the road, if you're going out to play, it's not the easiest instrument to carry along. That's what people had at the moment. And when it came to the musical influences, I thought about this so many times. What was heard, what was listened to around the house, my house, and all my friends' homes and everything. There's a few American sort of exported goods in music that have come that way. Elvis was there. Motown, country music. And then there was this concept of gammel dans, which means old dance. And this is sort of the folk, the popular style of music that people enjoyed at the time and still do there. The reason it's called old music, well, it's a bit of a sort of a leap, because really what it means is not Norwegian music. It came from continental Europe. But those dances, and you probably know some of the polka and waltz, etc., they came from sort of the continental Europe. We called it old music, and the instrument that everybody loved at the time was the accordion. That was the instrument of the time. It's kind of like the guitar here like we saw this morning. Here in the United States, the guitar is the folk instrument. That's the one you go to to play, to sing along, to kind of have a good time and be social about it. There's the accordion there as well. So it's just kind of the setup. Let's go to the next slide if you don't mind. Reverse of this, if you look into the city, this is what you see there. This is my favorite picture. So you'll be sitting in there and looking out, or the other way around. So, 1984 in Norway, two things sort of happened with me. This is when I got really serious about music. I told my parents, I want to play the guitar. That's just the way. I want to play the guitar. They didn't know anything about that. Neither did I, but I wanted to play the guitar. So happened that a very skilled guitar pedagogue, classical guitarist, his name was Bengt Martinez, he's passed away since then. He had an advertisement in the newspaper just the next day after I told my parents this. This is the only time he's had an advertisement in the newspaper, so it was just kind of a coincidence. So I got set up with lessons, started at 9 years old at a classical guitar teacher's home, at coach's home. And at the same time, well, slightly afterwards, I formed a band. We called those bands at the time a dance band. It kind of has a different meaning of what it has today. Really what it is aspires to play and entertain at social gatherings and weddings. And sometimes we refer to this as a top 40 band. Can you imagine at 10 years old? This is what we aspire to do. I gathered 2-3 friends. One was very good at playing that instrument, the accordion. He was really good at that. He had been taking lessons for a while. And then I got a starting drummer and a starting bassist. I was the singer and guitarist in this band. We became very, very popular around town. We had lots of engagement. It wasn't only because we were young and sort of there wasn't a circus act. We got truly pretty good for that time. So that was continued to grow for me. So why don't we go to the next slide then? So this kind of set up two streams for me in music, two ways that I thought about music. So on the one hand, I got to go to this guitar teacher who was highly skilled, highly adept, and really, really into the arts of classical music, classical guitar. I didn't know what that was. But what I got from that was I had to go to his house, which was actually an apartment, small, and it was essentially like visiting with their family. He was married, had a wife, and then one son, and the son was slightly younger than me. There was something really magical about that at the time. It was so different than what I really grew up. It was so nice in a different way. So his son was so creative. He was painting, he was drawing, everything, every little piece of music that I still have from that point on. If he could find a blank space somewhere, he would be drawing something at it. His wife was a kindergarten teacher. They were so deliberate about how they thought about life. And they sort of instilled, the whole mindset was that music and art is something internal. It's something that moves you, something that shapes you. And the agent for this is confidence. Their learning strategy for everything was to build confidence. Music was one vehicle for that. It could be other things. It could be art. That was for their son. Whatever it is, it was a vehicle to build confidence. And that was going to be the biggest currency that, through this mindset, that people would have for the future. Many, many years later, we'll see, we'll talk more about that, but that's one of the things that really was so impactful to me. What this translated to in music was there was always a positivity. There was always the positivity that there was always the encouragement. You did well. This is what you did well. Now I want you to do even better. It started with, what did you do well? When I hear somebody who teaches music, and honestly, I've heard it lots of times, who go to the negative, to say this is no good, you can't do it like that. No, I don't like your style, I don't like your interpretation, I don't know. No, you got to do it in a different way. It's all sorts of negativity. In fact, it's almost a way of teaching, or something that is almost mystified, right? And even maybe admired sometimes. I always think to myself, wow, you just took 2 steps back. You might have taken 1 step forward, but you just took 2 steps back, actually. So that's very, very important to me. The other part that I soon got to understand that was my other musical life. This was the one that was going around town playing in my dance band. It was that music was a vehicle for, that was a connection. It was a connection with other people. This is very popular. People sung up, just like we did here this morning. They danced for sure. That was a feature. But it was something that created and established connections, essentially. We became the warm-up band for a much more professional band that really had a main gig. But this was really really also impactful to me. Didn't think perhaps so much about it at the time, but it created this other stream that I was, you know, that I had the internal side that I got through the family, through this learning of classical guitar, but I got the external words and communication as well. So that kind of set me up for these two streams. Let's see what's on the next slide. By the way, if you go back for just a moment, this is not just a random, if you don't mind just thinking back for just a moment. Yeah, this, go back. This is an artwork of that son, by the way. Now he's 40-some years old, and he's very famous in Norway. He sells artwork for all of it. He would probably say, where did you feature that? Well, that's the one I really liked. But he's gone through so many phases as an artist, and if you go to Norway, by the way, completely digress, but whenever there's a public building, whenever there's a government building that is built in Norway, a certain percentage, I think it's 1 or 2% of the entire budget of the building has to be spent on art. So, you can go around public buildings and you'll find these artworks in different places. So it's a really neat thing. I just thought of that when I saw it. So anyway, why don't we go to the next slide? All right, so for me, the next big step then, when I went to high school, well, this was not, even at that time, not that common to even go to high school. I went to something we call a gymnasium, still is called that actually, which were for those who were academically inclined to, or just academically interested. So it wasn't even mainstream to do that at the time, but I was very fortunate because next town over, there had just been opened up a music concentration at a high school that was available. And if we were to translate that into today's world, it would be Performing Arts High School. Well, when we say Performing Arts High School here in the United States, and now I lived here for more than half of my life, and my job has been to travel around the country to visit Performing Arts High Schools now for 15, 20 years, they are sometimes elaborate. They're big. There's oftentimes 3 rooms, one for choir, band, and orchestra, lots of equipment and lots of students that are engaged. This was nothing like this. We were assigned essentially the house where the janitor was supposed to be living next to the school, a little just plain old house. The living room became the classroom, and then the bedrooms became the practice rooms. We were 8 people in the cohort. There were 8 people, we were the second cohort, and I think there were 8 or 10 people in the previous ones as well. For me, it became just such a profound experience. And I think this is kind of every step here has been really profound to me. So, first of all, this became the opportunity to really understand music. So, remember one of the first things we studied was Mozart. So I was presented the score of Eine kleine Nachtmusik, famous piece of music, and I also remember the 40th Symphony, G minor by Mozart. I knew how to read music, but I never thought about the connection that, wow, of course this music that you hear out there, to be written out, could be thought about, it could be talked about. That's one thing that was a big eye-opening part to me. The other part was, then I started to see, well, there's something about music and identity. There's something about people's opinion about music. Being at age 15, 16, this was pretty strong. You had people that liked jazz. You had people that liked religious music. You had people that were doing fusion. There was all sorts of different things. That was new to me. I hadn't really thought about this. I had thought about music being like a connector, something internal and communication between people, but it also has something to do with identity. And for better or worse, perhaps. But it was close. It became a real thing to me at the time. It sort of created a lane of like, which one were you in? Were you a jazz musician? Were you a classical musician? Could you cross over? Which one were you in? Just something that became a mindful thing to me, or I started to gain some mindfulness around it. Anyway, let's get to the next one. So for me, then the next thing was to go to college. This was at that time certainly unusual, even in the early 1990s. And it wasn't even what we call college here. It was called a conservatory there. That's how you study music in Norway. You go to a conservatory. We have several conservatories here in the United States as well. In fact, some of them have the name conservatory in the title. So 6 or 7 of those. Where I worked, the Jacob School of Music, some people call that a conservatory as well. But this was really an isolated place where you were just going there just studying music. Then music for me became about specialization. Music became about so almost like athleticism. There was a competitive element to this, for sure. There was very much a mindset of music, something that you accomplish. It was a healthy setting in so many ways, but it was another feature of how we looked upon music. But really what was my takeaway from the time, and that I look back on so fondly. I have a picture here of Andres Segovia, by the way. He's the most legendary classical guitarist, right? And played the guitar much like Peter played it this morning, by the way. Same type of guitar. Last weekend, by the way, I was at the Metropolitan Museum of the Arts in New York, and they have that exact guitar display there, by the way. If you're there, it's really, really hard to find, but you have to kind of go on in the music connection there, or you have to actually look for it, but they have that exact guitar there. Anyhow, I digress. What really I got to understand while I was doing that is like music has so many connections to art, to poetry, so many different ways that music plays in, and how we all relate within this sort of wish to express ourselves, and how music is just one more vehicle for that. While that was in a study setting, again, not something I had really thought about a whole lot. These became like streams to me of how music can be set up. How can they, what's the function of music, or what's the function of the people who play music, and how do we relate to others? How do we relate to other artists? How do we relate to, how do we express ourselves, and what are the intersections that exist there? And there are many, many. And believe it or not, that was sort of how I gained a mindfulness surrounding that as well. Let's go on to the next one. Then things changed for me. I decided that, okay, the world is opening here, I need to go somewhere. I need to go and learn more and see more, and I'm going to go to the United States of America. 1998 is when I came to Bloomington, Indiana. And that was unusual at the time, because all my friends in classical music in particular, really all of my friends in music in general, they were looking to England and the Netherlands. Those were the places that you would go essentially to study at the time. But I decided to come here, and it was a big open mind, a way to open my mind in every possible way. First of all, there was the Imagine Concert Hall, and it wasn't even Imagine, it was real. The excitement about music here that I entered into the world, it was enormous. Certainly, there was not the accordion anymore that I didn't know how to play. It was the guitar. That was the instrument. If you could play the guitar, you had capital, essentially. And you had to do that. And then all what became so apparent to me was that it was no longer about streams. Here, what I loved here was that everybody, all music existed together, and it was just everybody appreciated it. That's how I saw it at the time anyway. And honestly, that's how I see this country in general, whether it's music or something else. People are very excited, people are very happy for other people having success and doing really well. I thought that was really mind-opening. I translated this back, and I was at the time starting to really think about how I had lived in sort of like streams that have developed. This became really, really real to me. Let's click on and see what we got on the next slide here as well. So, one of the first things I was set to do as a graduate student here was to teach guitar classes. And I had not done that before. And at the time, education was not, higher education probably was not as developed as it is now when it comes to syllabi and curriculum and things like that. Maybe hard to imagine, it's not even that long ago. But I asked the professor of the department, the chair of the department, what am I supposed to teach? Guitar classes. And he said, doesn't matter, just make sure they're happy. That was the answer I got. Well, listen, is there a schedule? Is there some benchmark here? No. That wasn't. There is now. But at the time, no, just make sure they're happy. All right, I go into the classroom, and much like this, right, just a group of people. I'm like, how do I'm a classical guitarist, but I have all this background from playing in bands, playing so many styles. How do I make sure they're happy and make sure they're learning something? It was not hard. Suddenly I could fall back on all those things that I had done, right? So much like we did here today, I just pulled out a few songs. Everybody sung along, everybody wanted to play, and it was really great. But I started then reflecting on like, what is all of this? How does it all come together? It's all meaningful. It's all the experiences I've had, all the many styles of music I've played. It's also really meaningful. So I started thinking about that. Let's click on to the next one here as well and see what we got. So I just started reflecting on this, right? We don't have time this morning to listen to all this great music, but was just even thinking to myself, in my country, we got music such as the Hall of the Mountain King, which is like a classical music piece that is iconic and has an immediate connotation to what it means, right? This is where the band Aha comes from, Take On Me. Everybody here has heard the song Take On Me, right? The Final Countdown is just over the border in Sweden, where Europe sings, and that's an iconic song that if you look it up on Spotify, it's like breaks every record. Both of those songs, by the way, they break every record, right? So I was starting to reflect on this, where you come from, what all of this is. And I realized it was both a resource and a great opportunity for connection here in every possible way. This is just a picture, by the way, of the other coast of Norway. The one you saw is the southern east coast. Here is the west coast of Norway, which is this dramatic landscape like that as well. So, all right, let's see what we got next. So what this meant for me was that I explored music in every way. I started on the classical guitar to play music from all over the world, India, Japan, certainly Latin America, and even Africa, right? I started playing instruments that I had never even known existed in the past. I started playing the Brazilian the cavaquinho, which is this little mandolin-like instrument, the charango, which is made out of an armadillo, at least the original ones had. I played it so much I developed a rash, actually, from the armadillo. A ticla, which is a Colombian mandolin, etc., etc. And people said to me, as I went and played with different people, especially with Latin American musicians, because that became such a big part of me, they said, "Oh, you sound like you're from Venezuela. You sound like you're from Argentina." I don't think so. Well, I think that is just how music works. I think that is just when you go deep into it and you just do it for real. Yeah, no, it just becomes, it breaks down those barriers, and you're just a good musician, and you just take it on, and it's not even about that. It's like, I think of it as acting, or you take on the role, and you have to become what's in there, and you have to really, really get in with that, and be that while you're acting that out, essentially. One of the real close focus, and I want you to watch my time, by the way, because I can go on and on, but I think I'm pretty good. If we go to the next one of the real close interests that I developed, and eventually became actually my dissertation topic, was music of Haiti. Now I'm pretty far from home, right? Norway, little Norway. My dissertation topic became music of Haiti. Again, not in a straight line, not because it's said in a book, not because of anything, because of that kind of organic process of just being open to music. So what happened one day, as I was studying things, it was just a class assignment I was doing in a graduate course. The task was something creative, but I don't remember what it was. But for whatever reason, I decided to loan some scores of music of Haiti. You can't just, even in Bloomington, where we have the largest music library in the country, and we also have rare scores library, rare books libraries, and all sorts of things. Even there, you couldn't just do this. You had to come through interlibrary loans. Some of you maybe remember interlibrary loans. It still exists, however, now it's almost immediate. At that time, it was not. It was a week or two before the score came in the mail, right? So I got this. I started looking at it, but it was a class assignment. I wasn't so embedded in this. But I started playing it on the guitar. I picked up, there was some piano music, there were some different things. And I started just kind of playing along. And I took my guitar to class. And I started playing some of this music. And the professor said, "Wow, this is really good. You need to do more of this." Still wasn't that interested, really. But by and by, sure enough, since he liked it, I was like, here's my way to do well in this class. So I did, and I developed this project further. So what this led to was that I got to explore music that I never even existed. There were sort of two streams here. The merengue, which there's also merengue with an E, which is from the Dominican Republic mainly. That's the one that you see in dancehall. The merengue, of course, it's related because the two countries are right next to each other, but it is more a mix of Latin American, African traits, and European traits as well. Then the other part of that is voodoo music, or here in this country is known, it's oftentimes referred to as voodoo with two double O's, right? Which is kind of a commercialized biased way of presenting that culture, but that is essentially a religious and cultural phenomenon that exists in Haiti, which is very much throughout life. So I started taking the music out of this arrangement for classical guitar. And now, as I have worked many years as a composer as well, I oftentimes rely on this music to take out traits of it in my music as well. So that's how we got there. Far, far away from home in so many different ways, musically speaking. But it's just an example of how, with an open mind and following these kinds of streams, there's such a rich culture out there. There's so much richness in what possible traits we could follow in music. Let's click on it and see what's on the next one. So this takes me to reflect one more time on this issue. World music, what is it? Is it just music? Typically, when we say world music, there is a bit of a bias in there, right? We're essentially saying, well, it's not Western European art music, right? So world music is something else. Well, you know, I think at this point we can all agree that's all music, really. So that's how we should think about that. What's on the next slide here? So by this time, I had essentially started to develop some awareness, specific thinking surrounding this, of course. And this is things that I'm sure you have thought about as well. But for me, that I could really articulate this more carefully and say, you know, well, there's certainly the bridge between cultures here that is opportunity. For me, I had gone over that bridge already several times, and I've used those bridges many, many times already. You are all, of course, aware of the many, many strains of popular music around the world. That includes, of course, K-pop, Latin music, and many, many other things as well. It is a real globalization connection vehicle. It's almost as part of political life in a way. That it's really a way that is just breaking down barriers just by being, essentially. Music is also a tremendous opportunity for teamwork. I talk about this all the time, by the way, in my day job as leading recruitment for our school. People come to our school and they say, you know, okay, well, fine, I'm just checking things out, but what am I going to learn that I'm going to need to do if I don't become a musician? Because you're going to do that as well. You're going to learn teamwork. That is what you're going to do. You're going to learn that you're going to have to trust somebody else to work hard at something together with you, and your success is going to be dependent on their success and the other way around. In a way that maybe doesn't really exist it's certainly not in every field, right? And all in all, we saw that already this morning. It's such a unifying force, right? Think about the protest songs, think about the activism and the community building that is taking place through music as well. So those are kind of the things that I, at that point, have really started to articulate for myself, and it couldn't have been a better setup this morning than to actually go into this and see somehow what the impact of music can really be, and we were able to do that ourselves. Let's click on and see the next. Believe it or not, after all this thinking and all this learning and all of this music making that I have been doing, later in life, I decided, later in life, that sounds like I'm really old, I would just say at another stage, I decided, you know, I think I'm going to learn a few more things. I took a course in something called Instructional Systems Technology, which is a big thing, by the way, at Indiana University. That was a big feature of that. And I didn't really know what it was. And as I started to take that course, I really didn't know what it was. Because instructional systems technology sounds like it's something in computers, right? And so it sounds like somebody who's taken that course should probably be able to fix your computer. But I certainly cannot fix your computer. Some people think of this also as instructional design. Well, really what it is, it's a study of instruction in every possible way, learning and teaching systems, as in what possible systems could that be, and technology in every possible way that could be, as in a book, as in a tool, as in anything that goes into, not necessarily computer-based at all, although we tend to think about this. This gave me a whole other opening, because then suddenly I was able to, and I continued to do this for a while, because I thought it was really, really interesting. It became a way for me to really tie together all of those things that I have been thinking about for so many years. Or at least that I had experienced for so many years. So at that point, I was able to really do some reading, understand what other people have thought about on this topic as well. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me, once again, actually, and maybe with even more awareness than what I had had before.